Hello and welcome to Story Mode. I think that we're unmuted and should be good to go, correct?
Yep.
Okay, well, hi. Welcome to Story Mode. If you've never seen the show before, this is something that we do rather infrequently these days, apparently. This is a podcast, and it's a book club where we sit here and we talk about a game that we played over the last 30 days. But in this case, it's more like 45 days because this episode got delayed a little bit due to E3. And then just life reasons. But real quick introductions. My name's Greg. I'll be your host today, and my lovely co-host Lewis. How you doing today, man?
Doing good. So yeah, I'm Lewis, also known as LRFLEW.
And part two of the co-host, which is Eggman. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. I'm Jacob. I like playing these types of games, and so that's why I'm here.
So we talk about short story-based games, generally indie games and stuff of that sort. Once again, this is a book club, so everything you're going to hear from here forward is going to be a spoiler. Today we're going to be talking about a game called Red Strings Club, which is by Destruct Team, and brought to you by Devolver Digital. And as far as Devolver goes, this is actually a relatively serious game for them. It's not like super bombastic and silly. This is a cyberpunk kind of visual novel almost. It calls itself a adventure game, but there's actually very little puzzling or adventure game elements in it, except until the end. There's a few mini games throughout, but I'd say it's closer to a visual novel in a lot of ways, or a choose your own adventure type thing. So yeah,
it has a little bit of kind of point and click stuff in it.
Yeah, well, yeah, a little bit, just a little bit to make it a point, enough to make it a point and click, but it's kind of drawing the line in my opinion.
It's like a third of each of these genres that we've called out, but not a full of anything.
Yeah, kind of. I don't know. I've seen a lot of visual novels these days, and I've seen a lot with like light elements of gameplay, like light RPG elements or various little mini games throughout. And I don't know. I think that visual novel kind of fits it, at least a little bit.
I would agree with that. It does like have the kind of formulaic, here's your main characters and here's who you're kind of playing, and then you're interacting with other characters, learning about them, and then kind of branching story, minimally branching, but interestingly you can see exactly how the story branches in one of the menus, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyways, let's get into what is Red Strings Club. Who wants to take this one, or should I?
I can go for it. So basically, Red Strings Club takes place on Earth about, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred years or about 100 years into the future, based on the end of the game, and it's a cyberpunk like reality where everybody has these, well, not everybody, but a lot of people, the majority of people have these implants that enhance them in one way or another, whether it's to make them more persuasive or to give them greater sex appeal or to
make them into a belligerent psychopath.
Yeah, or to like prevent them from receiving negative stimulus online. Like a lot of the upgrades that you can get are related to your interactions with other people and interactions online.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the game opens with, you just see this guy falling down the side of a building, and you're like, well, what's really going on here? And so,
like those scenes in the movies where it's like, this looks like a precarious situation now. How did I get here? It's been a really long day.
Yeah, and basically it says that, yep, this is the end of the game. Now we need to figure out how we got here. And so you go back to the beginning of the game, and you're at the Red Strings Club. And the bartender at the Red Strings Club is Donovan, and the guy who is falling outside of the building, his name is Brandeis.
I really like Donovan. Correctly. I always pronounced it Brandeis in my head, but I don't think it's Donovan.
At the risk of going like too in depth as to what the rest of the game is, basically, broken down android stumbles into your bar, and Brandeis, who has a lot of implants and upgrades, like hacks into her brain and checks her memory, and finds out that there was a mole from the group that he's associated with that infiltrated this corporation called Supercontinent.
The group is called Proxima, by the way.
Yes. The group that Brandeis and the lady who infiltrated, Ariadne, they're both part of Proxima. And basically, when Ariadne infiltrates, she uncovers this scheme called social psyche welfare, which she interprets as a mind control scheme by Supercontinent. And the android that's in there making the upgrades for the people that come into this office, basically, I'm not really sure what happens after that because it kind of blacks out, but basically Ariadne tells the droid to go find the Red Strings Club, then she shows up, and that's where the story starts, and you're trying to uncover what happens.
I don't remember ever mentioning the Red Strings Club. I do remember, because she started to figure out about a second program called Mirror Neuron Algorithm, which seemed to create that SPW program, the Psychic Welfare Program, and is supposed to make it work on people without the implants. And as she's starting to read about that, the security system guns her down, dead, and starts aiming at the Akira bot, and she starts escaping and gets shot, so that's how she's injured, but she makes it out and stumbles into the club.
Yeah.
Also, I want to add that the upgrade thing, because when you first see the Akira bot, she's working to add these like upgrades to the humans, and there's this like kind of pottery mini game thing that happens where you build the implants, and that was so cool. Like, I saw that in the trailer. It's like, I want to play this game because that looks like so much fun. It's in the game for like this 10 minutes for the flashback, and then you never see it again. There's a lot of systems like that in the game where it's like there for a short period and then it's just gone.
Let's talk about the structure of the game real quick. So the game kind of has three main parts, I guess. So the first one is almost like an LA Noir light, where you are making beverages in the bar, playing as Donovan, and talking with people that come into your bar. Donovan is an information broker, and his job is to basically deal in information, right? And it's if you've seen any like cyberpunk sci-fi, you probably have a pretty good idea of what that's like. And so that's his job. And you'll have various clients that will come in that are leaking information to you in exchange for other forms of information. And there are various characters that you meet along the way. Then when we go into this flashback, you play as Akira. Playing as Akira, you are basically putting the correct implants into people for what they want. They give you a bio, and then you make the implant with the pottery minigame, which is really cool. And then you put the implant into the client. During this portion of the game, up until the Akira bot joins you, I really like the game. I think that the minigame of making drinks is really engaging and cool, and the sound effects are very, very satisfying. The music is good. The art is really nice. It's really, really, really well done pixel art. But there's a point where the game kind of takes a turn for me in the writing, and we'll get into that in a bit. Initially, it's all very... here you're learning about this world, you're learning about the science fiction, you're learning about what's going on here, and you're getting a lot of acronyms, and you're learning about companies, and that portion of it is really cool to me.
I need to nitpick for a second. I made this mistake. I think I started this saying that the name was Akira. It's Akara, Akara. That's the name of the android.
It's really hard to not call it Akira because
I know, right?
Yeah. I meant to look that up and see if it actually meant anything in Japanese, but it's also worth mentioning that you learn very early on that the Akara program is a program of androids that were designed to feel as close to possible human empathy, or as close as possible to human empathy. They were supposed to empathize with humans and make them happy, basically.
Yes. I mean, literally their programming goal is to make humans happy.
Yeah, it's worth noting that first thing that you're doing, where you're creating the implants to put it in, the lesson you're supposed to learn there is that Akara isn't necessarily just building what they ask for. Because like the first person that comes in and says like, I need more attention on social media, and you can put in the thing that like it increases their charisma on social media, or you can put in the thing that increases their sex appeal, whatever. but they'll end up coming back because that doesn't make them happy. You have to extrapolate and figure out what they actually want, not what they say they want. And that's supposed to create this impression that Akara is supposed to be really smart in figuring out people's emotions and what actually would make them happy, what they need more than what they want.
Yeah.
I was kind of looking forward to. I was kind of wondering what the point of all the like installing implants is, because these just seem like random people, and they do kind of pay that off later. Because at the first you just get a few people, it's just kind of introduce you to its mechanic, although it goes away almost immediately after. And then you get a line of people, one of whom is listed as a fortune teller, who's actually Ariadne, and then there's 3 CEOs, CFO, important people at Supercontinent. And Ariadne infiltrates, and she's like, oh, here's some new designs. Why don't you use those instead of whatever you were doing before to install into the Supercontinent people? And one of those decisions actually matters. And it's hard to tell that it will matter, but it is very interesting later.
2 of them matter, actually. At least it did for me.
The only one that I could tell that mattered for me was Joanna Septis's.
Yeah,
Joanna's the COO of Supercontinent, and she goes missing, or at least she went missing for me.
I'm pretty sure that's the only one that appears in the timeline. You had the 2 that you could put things in, but Joanna is the only one that choice appears in the timeline. It's worth mentioning that at any time you can click on the upper left corner and you get a timeline of all the different choices you made to get there. And at the very far right, past all the choices you haven't made yet, is just the single dot that says that Brandeis fell from the window.
Yeah, there's 2 people that came up later for me. There was Joannis, and then there was another dude. Joanna? Okay.
Joanna Septis.
Joanna Septis, who I put a depression module into, and then there's the other guy that you're talking to at the end a whole bunch, or at least I was talking to at the end a whole bunch, who I put a punk module in, who was calling in sick at work and was one of the people I was communicating with a whole bunch at the end.
That was the chief financial officer, the CFO, right?
I think so, which would have been Adrian Ferguson.
Yes, that was it. It started with an A. I couldn't remember his name.
I really wish
I'd remember.
The only one that I remembered was Joanna, because I went back in the timeline, because the other ones didn't appear on the timeline. I wish I would have remembered what I put in Adrian, because I had the same deal where he was like homesick and not like kind of being reclusive.
I think it doesn't matter which module you put in. It just does that.
It's just flavor text later on, I think. Yeah.
That's because later on, like at least for me, Joanna was trying to commit suicide, and it's for me it was because I installed in her the
empathy.
Blind installed depression, which obviously makes sense, but I installed the one that suppresses all other upgrades.
Yeah.
So she was like going insane because she was basically a drug addict, but for upgrades.
Yeah, I did the empathy one as well, but I did watch a let's play where they put the punk in, and that one does something different. Instead, she holds a gun to you.
Oh,
That's
really?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
I only played through the game once, because my philosophy with these kinds of games is that I don't ever feel that it's going to be different enough to warrant a second playthrough, and the experience that I want out of it, I'm going to try to get the first time. So
yeah, this is one where I thought about playing again, but I was like, if I played again, I'd want to do a perfect playthrough, but it doesn't seem like there's a perfect playthrough for the game, so I just decided not to.
I killed Diana, and I felt bad.
Oh, so
That was
she
like the
wasn't
only
helping
thing
you
that
in the
got-
final scene?
No, she was helping me, but she was getting gunned down by people.
I never had anybody. The
So
only
it's
person,
just like, they're breaking down the door.
the only person that died for me, other than Brandeis, who dies for everybody, was Joanna, because I had the scene that I had with her was that I could try to talk her down from committing suicide, and I made it through one dialogue option before she committed suicide. I was not good at that.
Really? I took one look at that, and I was like, oh, this is going to be real easy, and I just saved her.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did
I didn't
that.
have any problem.
Got her, and she agreed to help, and had the little conversation with her and everything.
Then
Yep.
you get her voice, and you just like threw her off the bridge. Great. Hey,
Yeah.
at least we know that the game turned out differently for us, and it's not totally on rails.
Yeah.
So let's move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, so because of this revelation that Brandeis has when he's hacking into Akara's memory, you decide to start investigating all these different people and try to figure out. There's a list of objectives, and basically you're trying to figure out what is SPW, the social psyche welfare, what's the mirror neuron algorithm, and
Yep,
what's it
the
going to
MAPE.
do? Is this legal? And then you also find out for the first person that comes into the bar that Supercontinent's CEO has gone missing, or not really missing, but he's kind of become the CEO on paper only.
Yeah. Jack B. Gaynor is technically still the CEO, but he has not made a public appearance in over 2 years.
Yeah. So I thought that all these. It was very interesting because when I got the objectives, I thought that it would be a list of objectives, and then for each character, I was supposed to cross off for every new person that came in, I was supposed to cross off every single one of these objectives, and I would get new ones when the next person came in. But you really have to, it's just like you get almost the whole list immediately, like within the first 1 or 2 characters, and then you have the rest of the people that visit to figure out what's going on, basically. And so, like, the first person that comes in is Diana, and she's a consultant for the SPW. Actually, no, she's the director of the SPW program, but she's a consultant at Supercontinent. And she's very, like, set in her ways. She believes in the inherent goodness of the program. And the idea of the program is that people with implants will be, like, prevented from feeling extreme sadness or extreme euphoria. Like, they reiterate during the game that, like, that's not actually what's going to happen, but on the surface of it, that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah, Diana has the line where she mentions basically prescription antidepressants and basically says, how is this different?
Yeah. And
She also said that it was cheaper than prescription antidepressants.
Yep.
It's like, we're just shutting off a quarter of your brain. It's fine. It's totally fine.
yeah, and so as you're you're the information broker. This is when you're talking to the people in the bar, you are playing as Donovan, and you're asking questions and trying to figure out information.
Okay, worth also adding here that when you're asking questions, you always start by giving them a drink, and there's a little mini game where you're basically honing in on an emotion on the person you're asking. So, you might want to put them in a sad mood and then ask them about the thing if you want to get a certain reaction, or, you get different options. They start playing with that a little bit later. So, like, there's one person that comes in and she gives you the requirement that you can only give her a certain type of drink once, so you have to go through each emotion once for each question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was curious, were you guys able to match the emotions in the little mini game very well with the questions that you should be asking? Because I found that for each person, I screwed up a question at least once every time.
So this is my first complaint about the game. I think that there's portions of the writing, especially, where it's not particularly clear which question you should be asking to do it correctly. And there was a few times where I would ask a question and then the response would be completely different from what I was expecting to get out of the question. And this often happens, I find, with a lot of smaller games along these lines, where you have dialogue choices. It also happens in bigger games, such as Mass Effect, where you have a question and you're like, okay, well, this is going to be asked like this, and then the character turns around and then says something completely different. And you're like, I know people had a lot of problems with Fallout 4 actually doing that, where because it didn't have the full write-up of what your character was going to say, it would just have like basically it would just have like a mood, like just a emotional response, and then you'd select that, and then your character would say something completely different. You're like, that's not okay. Well, and I felt that quite consistently throughout these interrogations. Granted, there are ways for you to get amnesia pills to make people forget all the questions, which I got twice, luckily enough, and was able to reset back and go through them again. But I didn't find the mechanic of questioning people particularly well done. I found it kind of frustrating.
I got
Personally,
both of those amnesia pills, and then I just never used them, partly because wasn't sure what the best place was, and second, I realized kind of quickly that the questions, while giving you different branching options, didn't really impact your ability to get to the end game. So it's just like, well, I'm just gonna get through that. Yeah, I'm probably working suboptimally on some of these, but I was able to work well enough and got the answers I needed to understand the story.
yeah, I guess I don't really have a problem with the dialogue options not mirroring exactly what's in my head, because everybody's going to think something different, and so I think that's just kind of an inherent problem with these like branching storylines based on text dialogue options games like the Telltale games or this game. So that doesn't bother me. I didn't have too many places where I thought it was like vastly off from what I had in my mind was going to happen, so that was also I don't know, it's pretty par for the course for me. I guess it's also just kind of like, do you want to take a risk or not? Like, it doesn't bother me. So,
I don't know. For me, it. Okay, here we go. So this game is incredibly political, right? It has a political agenda going for it, which is very left-leaning. And this kind of goes back to my issue with explaining what the dialogue choice is going to do very explicitly. Because there's a lot of times, especially once you get the Akara android, where in between each person, she will quiz you on the person, okay? And there was a number of times throughout those quizzes where I felt like I'm just being quizzed on my political opinions, and when I disagree with the android, instead of giving me a decent response, she just slaps me on the wrist for my response for not agreeing with her political stance.
I'm pretty sure she disagrees no matter what you say, though.
And I fucking hate that.
I got that not at all in the quizzes, so I don't know where you're getting that from. Like, do you have an example of which character specifically you got like a super political agenda from?
Okay. Is marketing okay?
That was the last question for Larissa, and the last question for each quiz is always an opinion, so...
Are women being oppressed in this world? There is absolutely...
That was not during a quiz, but yes, that was the most political part, so...
Because there's nothing leading you to the assumption in the game that women are being oppressed in this universe. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. Most of the characters you've talked to are female. A lot of them are very strong female characters. What do you mean women are being oppressed? And then she just straight up insults you.
Yeah. No, she does it no matter what you answer, by the way. Even if you say yes.
Care.
She just says, I didn't think you were that idiotic.
That one line straight up ruined the second half of the game for me.
I think you're reading too far into it. I mean, a lot of it, what it's using is the Socratic method. It's not putting any weight on... their opinion. It's just they're asking you questions and forcing you to back up your answers.
The game is coming at political opinion based on the game's world with no merit within the game's world. So go on.
I'll tell you my take on specifically the should women be oppressed? The question that the android asks you. So I work in a very male-dominated workplace, and for me, I try to think about these things often because I always wonder if there's an unconscious bias that I have, like against women, just because I'm in a male-dominated workplace, and I know that for a fact that some of the other teams in my company have had problems with this in the past, and so I try to be very conscious when I'm in a setting where there's, say, only one woman in the room, to just be very cognizant of like how they're being treated and addressed. I know that this is a game, but it is a game that was released in 2018, and so we still have these problems in our current society. So I think it's fair for the developer of the game to put a question like, or a prompt like that in the game, if only to get the user or the player thinking about the situation. You can take it the wrong way, but I don't think that particularly accomplishes anything. I mean, it doesn't even accomplish anything in the game because you don't see the result of your response to that question. So maybe it's not worth it being there in the first place. But if their goal was to just get us to think about it, then I think it did a pretty good job. In that series of questions that Akara asks you, like, should rape be allowed? Should murder be allowed in regards to SPW? I had a really hard time. Like, some of them are like, rape. No, I don't. I think that people who do that sort of thing are disgusting and should be put in jail forever. So, but yeah.
That entire section, I think, is interesting in the sense that I think Papers, Please is interesting. Not because I feel like I have an answer, but because the fact that it's asked is interesting. That last question, I mean, I had a reaction to it, which basically was none of these options seem to fit the nuance of the situation and what I would have said in that situation. But at the same time, it starts that with, basically Akara basically saying, hey, what if I ask you some questions and I'll take those into account if I do become in charge of the SPW? And I was like, no, I don't want that responsibility. Do not ask me those questions. No.
Oh, she didn't ask you the question?
No, I didn't have that choice to say that. I was saying my personal reaction to that was, don't ask me the questions. I don't want to answer them.
So here's the thing about Cyberpunk, okay? So Cyberpunk is kind of a distillation of the worst thing that we could possibly become, essentially. It's a dystopia. It's what we want to avoid, and it's rapidly happening, which makes it real and scary. The purpose of Cyberpunk, especially good Cyberpunk, is to take a world, separate it from our own, and then distill that to make a political point. So if you look at Blade Runner or a lot of other really good Cyberpunk out there, you get a kind of a look at our own politics from the eye of another world, essentially. Does that make sense? Am I describing this well? Okay.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying, or you're implying then that because
it took me out of it completely, because you've got this world which is building itself slowly, and then they just throw our politics from 2018 directly into it. Okay. What world are we in? Are we in a future dystopia where we're supposed to be taking a look at ourselves from a distance, or are you just talking about 2018? Because we're just talking about 2018. Tell me that in the onset, so that I know that you're going to be interrogating me of my political opinions throughout this entire game.
So,
because that's what I was getting from it. Wasn't, oh, here is a thought piece about what we could become. It is us now, look at you now, also we're in this future dystopia. And it was disjointed and just didn't work at all. If you want to have those political discussions, we can do that, but make sure that me, the player, knows what I'm getting into at the onset.
So you're saying that the removal of our world from the game's world is the fact that we have, like, the baseline is the fact that we have these corporations, which are, I don't know, the corporations are even kind of today too, but like specifically the main bit is androids, and you're saying that the like androids and upgrades, and you're saying that the political agenda of talking about the oppression of women and sexism isn't part of that world. It's part of our world, and it was doing a poor job of removing them.
There was nothing that was giving me the feeling that that was a problem in that world.
Well,
absolutely.
I agree.
Are you saying that something like this can't take place in the future and talk about modern day? I mean, are you saying that a film like Avatar can't have a moral? I mean, it's basically just Pocahontas, which isn't a futuristic movie.
It can have a moral, and it absolutely can talk about modern day. But please make it believable, but that problem is still a problem in that world. And up until that point, they had not made it clear whatsoever that that was an issue, or even something that would be thought about in that day and age. Does that make sense? It tears me out completely from the story. You're building up this really neat cyberpunk world which has its own problems, its own political agenda. That's cool. Give me that. And then you take it back like 100 years in game time to now.
So, would you have been more okay with that as a prompt if, say, Radhika had been a man and Larissa and Narima or like you'd have two or three more male like lead characters?
Potentially. But for me, I think it would be more of that would have made more sense to me if there was some inkling that this was a problem in this world.
May I also mention that question comes after the reveal that Dr. Edgar programmed all the Akara bots to call him daddy?
He just seemed like a fucking creep to me.
Well, yes.
But what does that...
I mean, but that's dismissing the issue then, though. Like, Lewis makes a good point that is a very indicative of sexism that's still present in this world, which I didn't necessarily pick up on.
Though, side note, even that point's kind of muddled by the fact that they refer to Akara as they in the exact same scene, which this game has some weird stuff in it.
This game has, how do I explain this? Everything about this game is incredibly leftist idyllic, which also leads you to believe that, well, if everything in this world is utopian, as far as like gender, race, age, all of that stuff goes, you know, there are trans folk in this game. You play as a homosexual character. It's very representative in that way. Also leads you to believe that today's problems have been fixed to an extent. Right?
Some of them, yeah. I mean, that's part of why they have the upgrade system, right?
Mm-hmm. So then why are they throwing to anyways?
I think part of the issue there is this game is kind of a vertical slice. So the idea is that it takes place in this cyberpunk world, but 70% of the time you spend in this game is in a single nightclub and you only see like a dozen people in it. 10% is spent just being the Akara bot, and the other 20% is in the finale. And you don't even get to that finale part till after this question. And I think maybe one of the points of this, that the reason why it asks all these kind of broad questions, is that it contrasts the very narrow point of view that you have in the club. So something like that question, I mean, maybe he doesn't see anything because he is, stuck in this club, that he really only sees what people show him when they come in.
But with Donovan, the whole concept of the character is that he knows everything.
Well, he's an information broker. He can find information.
So I would say that Lewis is saying that he may lack perspective because, like he said, he's stuck in the club.
And I think maybe even the point is the game itself is about perspective in that sense.
I'd also like to talk about the other questions that Akara asks you if she were to gain control of the mirror neuron algorithm, so that
let's just cover why she asks you those questions in the first place. So Akara basically asks you after the conversation with her creator, who is her father, or their father rather, should go with the game and be correct. Anyways, so their father asks or comes in and asks you and you ask him some questions, and then you kick him out because he's being a douche. And then Akara basically comes up and says, well, as a backup plan, in case I end up being in charge of the entire corporation, how about you give me your morals, essentially.
Yeah. So I think I have the whole set of questions here. So she asks, should I prevent depression? Should I prevent people from committing suicide? Should I prevent people from committing sexual assault? Should I prevent murder? Should I prevent sexism? And should I prevent homophobia and xenophobia? And I thought this was a very interesting. And for me, my opinion of the whole SPW concept to this point had been that it's a very like reducing human free will
endeavor, and so I was inherently against it. But for all of these questions, except for the homophobia and xenophobia one, I said you should prevent these because I thought that they were very extreme examples of what this would be good to stop. But if those are the only questions that are asked, it's very interesting because I'm like, oh, well, if we're going to stop murder, if we're going to stop rape, like, to me, those seem like higher values that this sort of system would be equipped to deal with. Whereas, like, the one that I answered that you shouldn't do anything about was the homophobia and xenophobia question, saying that I have faith in the innate goodness of humans to work past those problems as a collective. So
yeah, and it's interesting because Akara does have kind of a response if you say yes to pretty much any of them, which is basically like you seem kind of hypocritical. You want to get rid of this, but yet you say that I should do these things, and she kind of calls you out for that, which I wouldn't say that is a very left thing to say.
I appreciated it because I was like, man, I'm sounding really hypocritical right now because I've been like, as Donovan as a character, I was like, I want to get to the bottom of this. This seems like evil corporation bullshit. Like, I don't want this to happen.
For this portion, I was trying to roleplay Donovan. So I was looking at what because when I play games like this, I don't think what would I do if I was this character. I always think what would this character do based on what I know about this character. So I answered no to basically everything. It's like, no, you should stop it.
That's interesting. What did Akara kind of say to that at the end of the series of questions?
Called me stupid.
Well, she calls everyone stupid.
So
anyways, that's kind of like that section. We did kind of skip past the quiz mechanic. We've talked about these quizzes, and Lewis also mentioned that there's these amnesia pills. And basically, Akara, after you visit Diana for the first time, she's like, well, I've come to my conclusions based on my emotional sensors about this, and so I'm going to ask you some questions. And there is a right and wrong answer to all of the questions except for the last one, which is an opinion. And so she says, if you get 7 out of 10 right or more, I will give you a reward. And I thought it was really cool that if you could get enough right, you got this reward, and the reward was the amnesia pill. That was, it encouraged me to like
mechanically lets you reset a conversation and start from the beginning.
Yeah, it encouraged me to like really pay attention to all the like nuance. But I also thought that there was maybe a little bit lacking. Like there could have been a little bit more subtle hints, because I found it kind of hard for each character to like understand them based on their like snippets of dialogue, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, some of the questions were hard, but I managed to still get an average of about 8 out of 10. So, I mean, obviously it wasn't that hard if I could get that.
I failed 1 out of 3.
Oh, so you didn't get Irving show up then?
No.
Who's Irving?
Oh, if you get all 3 quizzes correctly, so after the first one...
Wait. I had 3 quizzes, though. Who did you get? Who are your 3 people?
Well, it's the same 3 people that come in. It's always...
But if I didn't have Irving and you had Irving, then that means that we had a different quiz.
Let me explain. So there are 3 quizzes in the game, right? When you get the first one correct, you get that amnesia pill. When you get the second one correct, she gives you an amnesia pill, and Donovan says, you know, this gets kind of stale if you give me the same reward each time. So she says, oh, I'll do something different next time. So when you get the third one correct, the reward is this character Irving comes in. He's also an information broker, but he uses a different technique. So while you get information out of people by serving them drinks that affect their mood, he specializes in torture. So
I got the torture bits, but I didn't get the third quiz. I failed the third quiz miserably.
Yeah,
so.
And what's interesting about this is he's a really young person, and so you kind of end up in a conversation about ages. Like, well, let's put our methods to the test, figure out each other's ages. So you start with him, and you try to give him drinks, and you try to figure out his age, which, by the way, he's 19. Got that one wrong, but you try to figure out his age, and then once you finish and you make a guess, he turns around and he does his term. He plays Russian roulette and puts a gun against your head.
What?
Yeah. And so you could tell him to either pull the trigger or give up and tell him your age.
I mean, I would just tell him my age.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you die there? Is there like a 1/6 chance that you just die and the game
I
ends?
don't think so. And also, if you pull, because I mean, I did it. You pulled the trigger, nothing happened, and he goes again. It's like, now your chances are 1/5, and then he did that. And I went as far as to having 3 chambers left, and then Akara just says, "Look, I didn't mean for it to escalate. Could you just please stop this?" And that was when I was like, okay, if the android knows what's up, I should probably listen.
That
Can I
Yeah.
can I complain about the quiz mechanic for a second here?
Go right ahead.
So I didn't like the quiz mechanic, and here's why. It changed an interesting story into what just felt like a video game. So games like, I like it when a game immerses me into it. Okay. Especially when it's a story that's being told to me by a video game. I like it when I feel like I'm in the video game and I'm enjoying this world. Those quizzes are the most gamified thing I've played in a game like this in a very long time, to the point where it straight up pulled me out of it every time one of these popped up. It's like, well, okay, time to do my homework with the android. And I just, fuck that mechanic. It's just so stupid. It's like, okay, and its reward to you is, oh, well, if you pay attention to this, you get a little bonus. I should get that out of the conversations, which is the interesting mechanic, not the dumb quiz about the conversations after the conversation is over.
I guess there are 2 reasons that I really like the quiz, and I've mentioned one of them already, is that it encouraged me to pay more attention to the subtle nuance. But also, I think that the quizzes kind of reveal to you more, like, if you didn't dive into a certain area when you're quizzing somebody enough, then you can kind of glean extra information. And
Sure.
it does a little bit of characterization. It is a little bit gamified, but I felt that the reward of the amnesia pill, like an extra mechanic that you don't get unless you're good at the game, I thought that was really cool. So
I guess, but I really wish there was a better way of doing the same thing. Maybe instead of here is a multiple choice questionnaire homework session after every interrogation, I guess, or conversation. Maybe there could be a way where she just has a conversation with you and it's more along the lines of the regular dialogue choices. I don't know. I don't like the format of multiple choice questions.
To
It's
concede to the middle ground, the in-game reason for the quiz is that Akara says, because she's supposed to be really empathetic, and so she's, you ask her after the first person, Diana, comes in, and it's just like, did you get any information if you're, from your abilities? And she's like, way too much to convey. I have an idea. Let me ask you a quiz, and that will help me convey what I figured out. It's like, how does asking questions in basically like a standardized test exactly convey information? And it could have worked if the questions were better, I think, for that. There is a way to make that work, but these were just very static questions. They didn't really do much.
I think it kind of goes back to my problems with some of the writing, where it would feel like you'd see one thing written down, you answer the thing. I think there's a lot of writing in this game that is very cookie cutter and simply written. Does that make sense? Where it feels like it wasn't written in English originally and then translated into English, or it was written in a very simple format. And I wish that there was more to the writing, I guess. It almost felt like it wasn't respecting me as an adult and was trying to be written as something that a younger person could understand, if that makes sense. I don't know. I felt like that whole portion of the game was almost belittling my intelligence. I think is a pretty good way of putting it, of how I felt every time those quizzes came up, because it's like, oh, here, it's time to do a quiz on what you just did. It's like, yeah, I know this. 9 out of 10. Okay, cool. it's why is the video until the second one, which I failed, to not get the other character, because I'd stopped caring at that point. But I don't know. I felt like it was not respecting me as an intelligent player personally. I don't know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth.
I don't know.
Cool.
Like, I got the same sort of catharsis from succeeding a quiz as I did from solving a puzzle in Portal. Just because it's like
not even close. For me,
I mean,
anyway.
you get more. I mean, obviously, because you didn't like the quizzes, but like, you get more from Portal because there's more puzzles. But like in here, there's only 3 quizzes, and so. But I was like really motivated to like try to succeed the quizzes because I wanted to get the reward. Like that, it was very compelling to me, and I guess it wasn't as much for you guys, but yeah,
I'm glad that the
I
mechanic
liked it.
for you, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know. As I said at the beginning of the
opinions either way.
I really wish I loved this game. I genuinely do, because the presentation is flawless.
I can understand that. I've had that opinion on many of these story mode games.
We should talk. We can segue away from heavier topics for a little bit to talk about like just the aesthetic of the game and that sort of thing too, if we want to.
Damn fucking fine pixel art.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, like if you notice, like even when you serve people drinks, they'll sit differently in their chairs, or they'll like if you give them a drink to stress them out, like they'll tap their foot, or like
if they're really relaxed, they'll pull out a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And when you're in the very first one when you're using the lathe to craft the upgrades, you can change the music. I think is there only 2 tracks?
No,
Anyways,
there's more.
There's like 3. I heard 3.
I think there's like a dozen, maybe half a dozen.
Those are just pretty catchy. I love them. It's nice that they had that though, because that was easily the most tedious part of the game. I hated the lathe thing where you had to like
really
fix the
I liked
shape.
that mini game. That was like cathartic to me. I enjoyed that one.
Okay.
I think this is a soundtrack I'm gonna go purchase.
Maybe.
Like I could see myself buying the soundtrack for this, listening to it, because it's just super chill synthwave stuff that's all really well done.
I think we might want to start moving on to the finale. So we've talked about pretty much everything up to that.
Yeah, so in the last one, your plan to basically infiltrate Supercontinent has come to a head, and Brandeis shows up in Ferguson's office because apparently that's the only place that you can get a connection to. I can't remember exactly what, but that's like where he needs to be.
Either the building apparently, to prevent hacking, uses a landline phone network. So you have to go there in person. And locally, Brandeis has a basically voice modifier implant, so he could sound like anyone he wants to. And so you have to get enough information to get the voices, so you can impersonate the person you need to impersonate to do what you need to do over the phone.
So this is in my opinion, the most adventure gamey portion of this game. And I wish it wasn't the way it was, because I found these puzzles really, really tedious. And I'll explain why I found the puzzle really tedious. So they state that you need to phone people using a landline phone, I guess because it's not traceable or less traceable or whatever. And they explain to you how to use a landline phone, and stating that you need to use the numpad, all caps, to dial the phone numbers. And
you can
there's
also use the on-screen.
You can't. It didn't work with my keyboard for whatever reason.
Well, I was saying the on-screen, you can just click on the buttons too. You can click on the buttons or use the numpad on your keyboard.
Didn't work with the numpad on my keyboard, which was infuriating to me.
Did you have numlock off?
Yes, I had it on. So that was infuriating. I tried it with it on and off. Sorry, and it wouldn't connect. I tried restarting the game. Wouldn't work with my numpad. Okay, so that was infuriating to me. Second thing, to call somebody, you have to manually dial the number every single time. Okay, by clicking on the buttons. If you click the wrong number, it just says does the same piece of dialogue, which is basically psych, wrong piece of or wrong number or whatever.
Yeah.
And you want me to not get super mad at your puzzle thing where I have to dial a lot of numbers repeatedly and call separate people? Number one, either swap up the dialogue or let me skip the dialogue in between the calls because he says the same thing every damn time. Number two, give me a speed dial option because God.
Yeah, I think a speed dial is definitely necessary. Also,
that
didn't.
Stupid.
You didn't have Joanna join you, didn't you? Right?
No, you joined me.
Someone
join
said
I didn't because
you did.
wasn't able to talk her down from the ledge.
Okay, because if you have her join, you can basically call her up at any time, and she gives you pretty major hints.
Her and Donovan.
Yeah, I guess
Diana, but in my case, she was getting shot the entire time. So every time I called her, it's like, they're breaking down the door. And then it would fizzle out, and I call her back, and she's like, I'm still okay, but they're still breaking down the door. I'm kind of funny. Because I sent her out.
I actually kind of enjoyed this puzzle. It got a little bit tedious at the end because it was like, okay, I figured out how to do all this. But my biggest problem was that I couldn't remember which character I had called as which voice, because by the end there's like 7 characters and you have 4 different voices and you can't remember who you've called with which voice, and if you need to call them back again with the same voice.
You're calling the chick from HR, and you're calling the COO, you're calling the lawyer, and you're using different voices for each one, and you're manually dialing the number each time. And if you call the wrong person, it just gives you no dialogue options. If you forget to swap off the voice, then you're just prank calling people.
Oh, and
no one's getting about the fact that you're just calling them repeatedly in the middle of the goddamn night on a night where they're supposed to be punching this giant piece of tech, and also they have the worst security in the entire universe. By the way, you're in the office of the COO of the entire company, and you're trying to upload Chief Financial Officer, sorry.
Yeah.
And you're trying to upload a virus to the mainframe computer that's going to corrupt their entire system and bring down the company.
They by the way, to clarify, 9 different numbers you can call, 7 different voices you can get. You can actually get a lot of voices.
Didn't get that many.
Nope, there's an achievement for getting all of them, though. And I got the achievement, so I did get that many voices. And yeah, it at one point kind of turns into the adventure game, combined every item in your inventory with every other item in your inventory, except instead of items, it's voices.
You have to phone a fucking phone number every single time.
Yeah.
I thought this was a good idea.
Yeah, that section went on a little bit longer than it probably should have. It could have been simplified a lot.
They could have streamlined that quite a bit just by removing dialogue boxes once you've seen them once and adding in a speed dial option.
Oh, and we never actually talked about what happened to the CEO. We mentioned that the CEO was kind of MIA, but we didn't mention what actually happened.
You learned about that here.
No, you learned about it earlier, I think, if you ask the right questions.
Oh, I learned about it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, the CEO is a person named Radhika.
I learned who the CEO was, and I learned that they were 15.
I thought it was 16 at this point, but yeah.
15 is what I got. Anyway.
Either way, really young, and the story is that she was basically raised under the care of the Akara androids. The idea being that if this super intelligent AI were to raise a child, it would become super intelligent. And yeah, that kind of happened.
Probably a spoiled brat.
Yep. Definitely turned to become a spoiled brat.
Or just a recluse.
That and the CEO isn't dead. He's actually on a tropical island, and Radhika, the new CEO, who's 15, between the ages of 15 and 16, is his prodigy. So from the age of 3, he was directing this child's growing up period, I guess. I don't know the word to use, but yeah. So that's the first big twist. And then you go to upload the virus after you get through all of the talking to everybody puzzles. Granted, as much as I found that puzzle tedious beyond all reason, there is some funny dialogue with the
Dr. Coldstream.
with Dr. Coldstream as well as the lady from HR,
Oh, right. Who's probably an android.
who's probably not a real human being.
Yeah.
There's
Her
also
first name is Karen. Her last name is from HR.
yeah, Karen from HR. Yes, it's also quite amusing when you get Larissa's voice and you learn that Larissa, who was in love with Coldstream, is trans, and her old name is part of the password to get into Coldstream's information, which I thought was fun.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that element of puzzle solving. It's like, oh, I'm like stalking these people and finding out their history.
You're using what's called social engineering, and in fact, it's mentioned earlier in the game as well.
The part that I don't like about it is how you have to dial every person's number every single time.
Yeah. So I think there might actually be 3 different ways to end this, and I'm not sure what happens in a certain ending. But on a related note, you mentioned the virus thing. You basically find that virus inside the office. One of the employees had kind of written it ahead of time as a failsafe sort of thing. You can you can also find the secret self-destruct option that Dr. Edgar put in. That's another way of doing it. Apparently, it's actually pretty hard to figure out, but you just dial a phone number once you get to the end.
I feel like I might have had that. I can't remember. Basically, my options. No, I feel like I did get that. I can't remember when it was though. But basically, we should just go through what we all chose. Basically, when I had the option of upload the virus or talk to Radhika, who's like contacted you and speaking into your neural implants or whatever.
I thought I was talking over the landline.
Sure, whatever. But could just be a phone. I don't know. But we live in the future. I chose to talk to Radhika because I wanted to hear what she had to say. So.
Yeah, me too. And then I regretted it immediately because it was really, really cringy written, bad dialogue. At least I found it really cringy.
Bad.
It was like,
it was preachy.
God.
It was preachy for sure. But
it was weird.
Basically, if you talk to Radhika, she tells you like, oh, it's all for the greater good. It's all fine. Also, it's already been in place for 3 weeks. I'm going to turn it off for you and see how you like it. And your character goes crazy.
Yeah, and just like cripples over and breaks.
For the record, and this is one of the things that I don't know, earlier in the game, you get an option where you're basically sharing the modules that the Ariadne had before she died, and you can choose between her knowledge or her determination. I went with determination, which made a big difference here.
I went with knowledge.
Knowledge.
Okay, if you go with determination, when that whole warpity thing's happening, a few dialogue boxes in, you get the option to use the determination to push through. And that basically cancels the warbly effect, and you tell Radhika to F off and you upload the virus. I don't know what happens if you don't have that option.
You don't have that option. It goes warbly a whole bunch, and then you say resist, and then it gives you a dialogue box and says resist, and then it gives you the same dialogue box, and you click resist, and it just goes on forever until you give in. You give in, and then it just kind of wobbles for a bit, and then you get the opportunity to talk to Donovan. You talk to Donovan, and Donovan says, I love you, and you say I love you back to Donovan, and then you snap out of it, and then you can go upload the virus.
I didn't say I love you to Donovan.
Can I just say that relationship is really forced?
Well, that's part of the other problem is like, but other than the fact that they're both like, oh yeah, we're gay, it's like, I guess we're also in a relationship, even though those two characters are only in the same room at the same time, like twice.
Yeah, it's not made apparent until the very end, and then they're like, "Oh, we're gonna be all heartfelt while Bandis is falling off a fucking building, and I'm supposed to feel bad because they're in a relationship." It's like, I don't know these people.
Can I just say that I got the impression that was platonic?
I mean, I can totally see that too. Like, I often this happens a lot in anime for me, where people are like, let's ship these two girls together because they're obviously gay. And I'm like, they never said that anywhere in the show. And it really bothers me. So I can see that too. Part of the reason why I chose to not say the I love you as he's falling in the sky instead of, I think I said, the other option is that you tell him.
Before he's falling.
What?
Before he's falling.
Oh, no, I told him while I was falling.
No, when you're getting the warbly warble. I don't know how I got it then, but when the whole screen is warping and you're like suffering from all of the depression and anxiety and crap that's been shoved into your brain because it's been shut off, and one of your best friends got gunned down in a lab and shit's going down and the world's ending and you're like, oh God, I'm not going to be able to do it. No, please, big CEO, I love you. That whole sequence, which is cringy as hell. If you try and click on Donovan's photo like floats around in the warpy bit, and then you can talk to Donovan, and the only option is Donovan, I love you, and then you snap out of it.
Oh, I got that too, but I thought that you had to click on Donovan to continue. Was that not actually the case?
If you got the determination, you can use the determination option instead.
So I guess
okay, I didn't have that, so
then you have to click on Donovan.
Yeah.
Anyways, either way, and I think whatever you do, you end up taking down the social psyche welfare system, and you get the big twist. Akara isn't actually Akara, it's Akara or something.
It's not actually Akara, it's Akara.
Yeah,
it's not Akara 184, it's Akara 1 through 184.
Yeah,
or 256.
It's supposed to be
mind.
Yeah, it's supposed to be just a giant intelligence that has existed since 2009.
I like this twist. That was cool. I liked it.
It was interesting. Maybe not the best written, but it was interesting how they presented it. And of course, very quickly on, it's like, why are you telling me this? And I was like, oh, you're gonna kill me, aren't you?
Yeah. It's also interesting how Akara says that she like rationalizes what decisions she makes. She's basically like toying with humanity to see what will happen, but not doing it in a way that will generally like cause the collapse of society. She's just having fun, basically.
She's using the butterfly effect to her strength.
Is it possible to not shut down the system?
That's what I'm thinking. I don't think it is. I saw 3 different things that could happen, and you explained that the third still shuts down the system, so the system gets shut down.
I was frustrated with that because I wanted to not shut it down, and then Brandeis is just like, oh, by the way, I shut it down. I'm like, wait. Because it wasn't an option. I can shut it down immediately or talk to Radhika, and I was like, I'll talk to Radhika because I want to see what she has to say, and I want to see if I can get the option later to not shut it down. But yeah.
Anyways, if you're at she's a hive mind and you get shot out of the building by security,
or by her, you're not really sure.
I think it's by
she
her.
basically says that the security's here, and I'm not in the mood. I'm not the kind of person to prevent people from dying or something like that.
But the reason she's killing you is because this is another thing that I really found kind of hard to read. The reason she doesn't want you to survive is because she's in love with Donovan and in love with humanity, and you're the one thing that could have prevented her from keeping her plaything around, and so she's there to say thank you, and also I'm in love with Donovan, so fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
Because she states that, or Akara, the hive mind, states that your character Donovan, who let her stay in the club and let her take part in all of the events of the past few days, and let the hive mind like pay attention and control the entire city, because the entire time that Akara has been in this city, she's noticed these patterns because there's this one spot at the center, which is the Red Strings Club, which is controlling everything. We didn't even mention the undead ghost Zambi.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, that was a thing that happened earlier on. Anyway, I don't know. The ending is so bloody underwhelming. That and the kind of unconvincing relationship between Brandis and Donovan, that's just kind of like, it's cute, but it's just there to be there. And it's kind of shoved on you 2/3 of the way through the game. You're like, oh, by the way, these two are a couple. It's like, okay, if this was the premise from the beginning, if
But
we
are
actually
they a
had-
couple?
yeah, but are they a couple? They're referred to as partners. And if you look really closely, they're both wearing the same bracelet.
I always thought of them like whenever they said that they were partners. I guess I was taking that as like
Business
detective
partners.
partners in crime and
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
No, they're definitely in a romantic relationship. And then the game ends with like kind of a heartfelt scene between the two of those. If it started with that, if it tried to make that relationship feel even slightly convincing, then sure. But it just wasn't to me. And then the game ends with Donovan falling, or not Donovan, Brandis falling out of the skyscraper right back at the beginning, and then he phones Donovan and says, "Hey, Donovan, are you there? Well, guess what? I'm falling out of a building." Or you can just say, "I'm leaving the country," and I guess lie. But in my case, I was like, I'm going to be blunt. He's like, "I'm falling out of a building and I'm about to die."
I don't know what happens if you tell Donovan about Akara, since I didn't select that option. I'm curious to know what it was.
I did, because I was like, well, screw it. Might as well give him as much information as I can while I'm falling out of a building. He's like, good, but I'm going to bleed out before I hit the bottom anyways, because I've been shot multiple times. And then he's like, also another thing, Akara isn't a single android. They are a hive mind that has been around since 2009.
2009.
He's just like, dot. And
He also says "I love you" though in that one.
Yeah, he does also say "I love you." And then Donovan, like, even if you don't say "I love," anyways.
I chose
Which kind of like diminishes the.
Wait, what? And then it just ends.
It kind of diminishes the gravity of that choice now that I think of it, because I was like, well, oh man, if they're really in a relationship, it'd be really like shitty of me to not say that I love you as my last words to Donovan. But I was like, I don't really care about that relationship, and so I'm going to choose the other one, and he still says it anyways, so then what was the point?
Exactly.
I chose to not tell him because I got the impression that Akara had basically let Brandeis die, because it's like, I let you know the secret, now you must die. And so it's just like, well, not telling him would be saving him in a sense. So I don't know.
I mean, yep, that's one way to take it. That's certainly.
Or he was gonna die anyway, and that was just like a card. I think that's the gist I got. Is there was no way for Brandis to get out of that situation, so it was a car coming to say hi and thank him, basically. Is it raining where you are? Because like your window is like flickering.
No, those are just trees blowing in the
Okay.
leaves blowing in the wind. A lot of shadows.
Okay.
You can't tell because the gain's set pretty high on my camera.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we're pretty much done with going over the story, so we pretty much should give our final thoughts and start wrapping this up.
Yeah. Let's start with Lewis and then go Eggman and then me. How's that sound?
I was thinking about
Sure.
letting Eggman go first, because I think that's the order of opinion.
Okay, Eggman.
Oh,
you
do
go
we
first
want to
then.
end on the good opinion? I'll go first. It's fine. So, I really enjoyed this game. Like I said, the quiz mechanic made me very happy, and I thought that it was interesting to try to like do some social engineering to try to figure out what was going on in this world and try to get insights into how characters were thinking. And I found Akara really compelling as a character, like, and the twist at the end, it was good. It was satisfying to me. I would say that I highly recommend this game. Even if you have watched this podcast, I think that because of the way that it's structured, you can go through it and get your own experience out of it, and it wouldn't even be ruined by listening to this
I mean, we haven't gone into a lot of the details on a lot of the conversations, so yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I guess I say I liked it, sort of. This game I'm kind of split on. I will say that overall I liked it, but it was weird. This is one of the few games, I mentioned this in a previous podcast, this is one of the few games that I didn't replay. I tried to replay every game, but I didn't replay this one. And I think part of it was I felt the way that the story branches worked was daunting, just kind of overwhelming. And so I was like, I don't want to play it again unless I know what I'm doing. But I don't know. Otherwise, when I was playing it, I didn't dislike it. I thought it was very interesting. It just was weird, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I really, really want to like this game. I am very, very mixed on it. There are portions of this game that I hate with almost every fiber of my being, and there are portions of this game that I adore. I think the soundtrack is fantastic. I think the presentation is beautiful. As far as pixel art and animation goes, it's a work of art. It's gorgeous. I think that the combination of borderline cringy writing in places combined with the political scolding combined with the really like not great relationship building between the two main characters kind of adds up to a decent science fiction flick with a nice twist at the end. And for me, if I were to recommend this game, it would be purely for the conversation dialogues between Donovan and the people that come into the Red Strings Club, because that was the highlight for the game for me.
Yeah,
was
certainly.
the mixing the drinks and talking. That part was really good, but the stitching between those just kind of ruined it for me. Took me out, and just I wouldn't recommend it. But if the premise sold you, sure, I guess if you can find it on sale. I don't know. There's a lot of games that we've played on this show that I would recommend over this in a heartbeat. I wish that I was a writer so I could say what I would do differently, but I'm not. It just didn't do it for me.
So shortly before the show, I was looking back at the games that we had covered this year, and I had determined that this is my favorite game that we've played this year. But it's not saying a ton, because the last game that we played last year is still better than this game, and that was California, which was my number 3 game that I said in our after show for our last episode of last year. So that being said, recommend it. I think we're gonna find better stuff this year.
Hopefully.
I mean, for you guys, it's like not hard to find something better than this, right? And you've already because it's my favorite, it's like almost certainly not your guys' favorite.
I'm not sure I'd say I dislike this game. I mean, I probably liked something like Doki Doki Literature Club better than this, but that's not saying much. I mean, I don't know.
I liked Subsurface Circular more than this, and it was a very similar format of game.
Yes, actually, I was going to say that. I thought this was very similar in style to Subsurface, but this had more to it. I think I might have liked this one more than Subsurface, just in terms of variety.
Yeah, no, there was less variety, I think, because the art is cheaper.
Also, I think the ending for this one is better than the ending for Subsurface Circular. Fight me.
Sure. I don't think either of the endings were particularly convincing. Honestly, I don't think either of the endings were particularly
like they were twist endings, but they're like, oh well, that makes sense. It wasn't like holy shit, which is kind of what I'm looking for in a twist ending.
Yeah, it was oh, okay, yes, moving on.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't want to compare it too much to other games, so I'm just gonna say that I'm mixed on it. Eggman loved it, and Lewis is kind of mixed on it.
I'll say I liked it, but not.
You're like mostly positive.
Yeah.
So by Steam ratings, I'm mixed. You're mostly positive. He's very positive. Sweet, we've got everything. Now, I didn't hate it. Just to be clear, yeah. Anyways, those ending puzzles. Speed dial, please. Thank you very much to everybody who's watching live, though. This has been the Storymode podcast. If you haven't seen the show before, we cover one game per show. We usually do one. We try and do one of these per month. This is something we do for fun. If you want to find the podcast and you're watching live, type an exclamation point podcast into chat. That'll give you all of the information. I've typed it in a couple times, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. You can also find the VODs on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ggblind1. We have a Steam curator, which is just Storymode podcast. If you follow that. It'll have all of the games that we've talked about in the past, plus links to the respective SoundCloud. If you follow on SoundCloud, you can get the audio there. You can download it, do whatever you will with it, or you can add the RSS feed into your podcast player of choice. And lastly, we're on Google Play. So if you have the Google Play Store, if you have an Android phone, just go into Google Play and type in podcasts and download it. We're not on iTunes because we got rejected. So nothing I can do, quite literally. I don't know why. Anyways, if you like the show, tweet at me, because apparently there's people that listen to this show that I'm unaware of. So
yeah,
if you enjoy,
if you didn't watch this live, tweet at Blind and say where you found the show, because we want to figure out where people are watching this.
Because apparently there are people that are watching this. So if you are, thank you. And do you guys have anything you want to shout out real quick before we fully close down here? Anything?
I'm good.
Oh,
you're good.
Okay, I could just say, you know, visually you can see my username below it, LRFLEW. Just go to that Twitch page. I will try streaming when I can. I've done speed runs and stuff. I might. He has a
world
streams.
record in a video game.
What?
You have a world record.
Yeah.
For speedrun.
It's uncontested, but it's still a world record, so I get to say it's a world record.
I guarantee you beat that game faster than the developer. So
yeah.
And my name is Blind, and this is my Twitch channel. If you're watching live, you can find me at twitch.tv/BlindIRL, and I do stuff over at Schematics Team on YouTube. So that's me. And thank you very much for watching. Let's close this down now. Cheers, everybody.
Bye. I was actually like, I think that was like